Okay. So we're going to post this recording afterward on our Facebook, on our website. So good evening. My name is Barbara Anderson, and I am on the executive team for the League of Women Voters of Manhattan-Riley County. I would like to welcome you to our legislative wrap for the 2021 session of the Kansas Legislature. Please join me in welcoming our guests this evening. So right now we have Senator Tom Hawk from District 22, Representative Sydney Carlin from District 66, Representative Mike Dodson from District 67, and Representative Suzi Carlson from District 64 expects to join us this evening if the court she's presiding over ends in time. And then we will expect Representative Ron Highland from District 51. I'd like to emphasize that the League is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports nor opposes candidates for political office. The League is interested in promoting informed citizen participation in government and sponsors forums like this as part of voter education. The forum will be conducted in 3 segments. The first segment is an opportunity for each elected official to take up to 5 minutes to introduce themselves and identify accomplishments from this session. The second segment is a 5-minute opportunity for each elected official to describe the biggest challenges of the session this year and describe the opportunities for next year. The third segment is an opportunity for attendees to ask questions. To ask a question, please send your question via email to the email address shown in my Zoom window, which is lwv.manhattanks@gmail.com. Board members Catherine Hedge and Karen Hummel will select questions from those submitted from our guests. Linda Utoff will ask the questions, and each elected official will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Sarah Fisher is our timekeeper. She will display 30 seconds remaining toward the end of each speaker's allotted time and a stop sign if you need to stop. All right, so we'll get started. Senator Tom Hawk is starting us off. Here we go. Ron's going to join us in a second. Representative Highland, I mean. Here we go.
Yes. Great iPad, Ron.
Yeah, Representative Highland from District 51 just joined us. Everyone received the schedule in advance, so he knows what we're going to do first. And so we'll just start off with Senator Tom Hawk and the introduction and accomplishment.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the League of Women Voters, appreciate you doing a forum, and appreciate your interest in good government and all of your efforts over the years, certainly since I've been a legislator, and before that when I worked for the school district. You have really tried to encourage people to get registered and participate. And I do believe that voting is one of the most important rights and responsibilities that people have. And I think your group and statewide have really worked hard on that. So compliments. Being in the legislature, there's always these haunting questions that when we sit on the Senate floor, which is behind me, I wonder about some of the great questions in life, sort of like if your car could travel at the speed of light, would your headlights work? And, you know, when I was a kid, we had these guest speakers that used to come to the high school, and I've had this question, I still can't get an answer to it. That's why do psychics have to ask you for your name? Just these puzzle me. I have several more, but I'll get on to what you asked me to do here. It's important to remember the session runs from January to May. We had sine die, I think, on May 26th, which was the official last day. We had 454 bills that were introduced in the House, 315 in the Senate. The governor signed 65 of the House ones and 45 of the Senate ones, and then one went into law without her signature. Last year, we had approximately 15 bills because of the pandemic. So when people call me and ask me, what about bill number 386? I go, could you tell me a little bit about that? I remember the other 300 after that, but anyway. or House bills. We did have 8 vetoes. 3 of those were sustained and 5 were overridden. The governor did do 18 line item budget vetoes on the mega budget. And then right before sine die, she had vetoed 2 others and 1 other line item veto. So I serve on Ways and Means. I'm the ranking member, which is one of the 3 people in the Senate that actually sits down in the conference committee and helps decide what the final budget is. When we vote on the budget, it's a yes, no vote. Once we get to the conference committee, there are 3 on the House. So I take that responsibility very seriously. And I really enjoy both advocating for what I think is good policy and making sure the money's there to take care of the things that I think everybody in Kansas benefits from education to roads, to funding our senior citizens, our disabled, and several things. So we did do one important thing, I think, that supports Fort Riley. It went too far. We had a reciprocity bill. This year is the Big Red 1 Year of Honor. That was mentioned by the governor. She is actually a child of military people and moved around the country as a kid and I think some places overseas. She thought that reciprocity allows people on their licenses, if they're licensed in other states, to get their license much more quickly, particularly military spouses. We also worked on a Northeast Kansas Veterans Home. It originally was going to be a few counties in Northeast Kansas, and the Senate managed to expand that. So we might wind up being able to compete for that in Riley County or Geary County, which I think would also be a great place. Most people were thinking of Leavenworth or Topeka, but I think we have some other good places. Highlights for me in the budget was funding our judicial branch. I think we're obligated to do that. We don't always do that and give them the money, but they're a separate co-equal branch of government. We restored the $7.2 million that they didn't get out of their fees because of the pandemic, things being shut down. We also funded staff and judges' salaries and a few other things. Other highlight was higher ed. We were originally, I think, not going to fund higher ed at the level we did, but we found out that we needed to do that. Only 30 seconds. Shouldn't have told those stupid jokes. Anyway, we put $53 million in, and I think that helps K-State, community colleges, private colleges, tech colleges. We put some extra money into mental health. We unfunded the level for people who are on HCBS and the PACE programs. The protected income level went up to 300%. And we did fund K-12 after a few shenanigans, what was called the Frankenstein bill. So I have a lot of other things. We didn't get Medicaid expansion. We didn't do state employee raises, and we didn't pass medical marijuana, but we did some other good things, and I'm sure my colleagues will share those with you. Great to be here.
Thank you, Senator
I had
Hawk.
one more joke, but
Okay, that's okay.
I won't do it.
All right, thank you, Senator Hawk. And now we'll go to Representative Carlin, followed by Dodson, followed by Highland.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. How's my volume? Okay. I turned it down a little bit when Tom was talking, so I didn't know. I finally on, and I have no idea what he said, so you're going to have to hear what I have to say. The year was very different than usual. I was talking to some young people today, and I said, you know, we need pages next year. We didn't get to do that this year. We weren't allowed to bring people into the building, which was a very good safety measure, and I appreciate that very much. Appreciate the way the leadership handled that situation. We had COVID tests available in the building, and we didn't have to go anywhere to get those. And we had good cleanliness and extra precautions of space and room in space, you know, the thing, the masks, the space. One of the things that we did this year, then of course, was to provide unemployment to people, which became a real rat race because we could not keep up with the applications. They had over 220,000 applications like in the first week of the shutdown when they started taking applications. We could not keep up with that. We probably would have had trouble if our system was up to speed, but it was not up to speed. We had been trying for about 10 or 11 years to upgrade that computer system in the Department of Labor and in several other departments in the state too. But Department of Labor just wasn't ever a priority, and it was denied every time it came before the committee. So we lost the ability to handle this kind of situation. And as we all remember, when Kathleen Sebelius was HHS secretary, and they everybody tried to enroll online at one time and everything didn't work. That's what we were facing. Plus there was millions of applications that were fraudulent. And we had a hard time figuring that out. And once we figured out that there was a massive fraud input into the system, then we had to change the approach again. So it was go one step forward and 6 back all through the session. And we did take personally a lot of calls from people and a lot of emails to try to get them into the system. And when my people asked me, then I was able to help them because I knew who they were. I could say this is a real person, it wasn't fraud. But my husband, who died 5 years ago, I got they filed on him too. So it was from some breach in the system. So that just exacerbated things. It's been very difficult for the governor, on top of having COVID-19 issues that became political right away. Instead of everybody considering the health and safety of people, everybody started fighting about wearing a mask or not. So it's been a struggle. It's been a hard session. We did we passed a tax cut bill that I voted against, and it was vetoed by the governor and it was restored by the legislature. It did a few things that were okay, but the biggest thing it does with the $300 million tax break for in corporations and the ones that are coming back from overseas, if there are some, and we will see what that does for our economy. It could place us in a good position. One of the problems with the bill was that it gave marketplace facilitators had a level, that's internet sales, had to sell $100,000 a year before they have to collect the sales tax on their products. And that is really unfair with the business community locally, I see. And, because the first dime that they sell, they have to pay tax on, they have to collect tax on, and they have to return it. So that was one of the reasons I opposed this bill. Plus, I feel like we were about a year or two too soon for a tax cut of that size. We are getting back on our feet and the economy is recovering, but it would be nice to experience a little bit of a base in our budget before we start giving it away again. Thank you.
Representative Dodson.
All right, well, as everybody knows, this was my first year, and I appreciate the work that League of Women Voters did on the run up to the election as well, and now for doing this. So I think, as Senator Hawk said, this is absolutely essential to our democracy. So thanks again for putting all this together. As a new person, if you recall, when we stopped March before last, there were a lot of bills stacked up, and the rule is that bills go in a 2-year cycle. So any that hadn't been passed die. Now, they don't really die. They go into a machine that relabels them and puts new numbers on them. So when Senator Hawk described the number that came out this year, just trying to keep track of those numbers and the subjects and the context of each one of them was quite an ordeal. The speed at which they come to you is important because, like on the city commission, you like to read and be conversant with them when they come up at the meeting. And in some cases, they flip so fast that you're getting the thing late in the evening or the night before, and then you convene at 9 in the morning. And if you've got 4 or 5 of those things, it's pretty tough to make sure you're making the right decision. So trying to read all that material, I think, was a bit of a challenge. But with the help of all the members, friends that are on this call tonight, they made it a lot easier by helping me understand the process at least. I'm on the Labor Committee, the Elections Committee, the Veterans Committee, and Insurance and Pensions. And I think most of our time really in commerce, I wanted to spend most of it on economic development, but a lot of our time was spent on trying to fix the labor issue. And as Representative Carlin has said, this was a real can of worms. I mean, it had been funded several years ago, but nothing had been done. So that in labor anyway, we and I sit on there with Representative Highland as well, but we put together a bill that has an oversight committee of smart people who has some policy guidance in it, has some dollars to be spent, some guidance on how you do the computer reconfiguration to take on this big task. And when it first started, I was a little disappointed in the Commerce Department simply because I didn't think they were being as forthcoming as they should have been to help us help them solve the problem. And the numbers of people who reached out for help was far more than I'd expected, both because they just didn't get paid in time, or it had a fraud charged against them erroneously, and that made it even more difficult to help. So the economic development piece, I think we ought to be pretty happy about. People got and organizations got quite a bit of federal money. And as you've seen from the reports that have come out of the city of Manhattan and the county and other places, we actually did much better than we thought. I had personally predicted that we're going to be down 5 to 8%, but we actually did almost as well as we did in 2019, which was a minor miracle. And then right now, there's a lot of kind of pent up supply. In other words, people have money in savings that we expect to begin to flow out and help stimulate the economy now. And I think at the state of Kansas level, we also have reason for optimism, and that is we've got a lot more money in the bank than we ever expected to have. For the same reason, that is revenue on a monthly basis, every month seems to be up. So I think that's really good news. I would like to compliment the legislative staff and Representative Highland. They did a lot of work on transparency. We could have had a session where the public had little idea of what was going on, but everybody worked very hard to make sure that we had Zoom, we had YouTube, all of those kinds of things so people could participate in their own government. And I also learned a little bit how to write newsletters. So I'll stop right there. Thanks again.
Thank you. So Representative Highland.
Thank you for the invitation. Sorry I had trouble getting online. I don't know what happened, but I finally had to turn the computer clear off and start all over again. But thank you for the invitation. And Representative Dodson, thanks for the kind words. I had very little other than to ensure that we had a filing system that everyone could access, and all the information was available to the public. It worked out well from that standpoint. My overview is the session was very quick, is more so than normal. And that was part of the problem. I felt bad for the newcomers because this was an abnormal year for being speeded up. And it was all done. We hurry in case we had to stop because of COVID. So we did everything at a very fast pace. The separation because of COVID, all the members were spread out, and a lack of events in the evenings disallowed us to getting to know the new members on a personal basis, which is to me, a really important part of the legislature. So I still do not know many of the new members in the legislature, which is disappointing. We passed several bills. Senator Hawk gave you the numbers. What he didn't tell you was that of those, if you do the math on that, we passed about 14.4% of the bills, which is an abnormally high number. That tells me that maybe we went too quickly and we'll have to go back and do some cleanup, which is unfortunate, but that's what happened. The bills that passed that were most important to me, I felt, were the Kansas Department of Labor bill. Representative Dodson gave you a rundown on that. The Oversight Committee, and they will oversee the update of the IT system, and that is critical to the future of that Department of Labor. We've tried to minimize the hurt that will be caused because of all the fraud to the businesses, because that unemployment fund is funded by businesses and they pay into that. If we had done nothing, their payments into that system would have exceeded their income taxes. So we had to mute that somewhat. We also asked that some of the COVID funds be backfill in there, not all of it, but a good share of it, so that we can minimize the harm we're going to cause to business because of the fraud. We don't know how much fraud. So part of the bill, we asked for a forensic audit. That will be taking place by an outside firm to determine how many millions of dollars was actually fraudulently sent out. And that will be important for the future so we can guard that ever happening again. It was a terrible situation. And like it's been mentioned before, we are all still dealing with it. The number of phone calls and emails I get from people, many of them aren't in my district, but I have to check anyway to make sure they aren't. And so trying to help those folks is really important. The Truth in Taxation bill I thought was important. It was a good bill. We expanded the licensure for the military spouses. I thought was a very good thing. And that was one of those we maybe heard a little too much. We'll have to go back and work on that a little more. The tax bill increasing the standard deduction I thought was important. We got away, decoupled from the federal plan, the federal tax, which I felt was important. It was something many of my constituents have been asking about over and over again. And also, if you do your decoupling from the federal, that's where you get to allow, then you can do your itemized deductions, even if you did not do them on the federal, or even if you did. So my disappointments were the budget bill. It was a huge bill. It was done in a hurry, obviously, like I've said before, and we have extra money. We know that. We did not have to spend it. And that for me was a big problem. I voted no on that. I'm old enough now, I've lived through several recessions. We've got another one coming. We know it at some point. We need to start putting money away and planning for our future. The other things I've been involved in were is my water committee. They assigned me to the committee to try to streamline the system, which is going to be difficult. There are 16 agencies involved and 5 federal agencies. So I'm spending my summer reading the laws on water and talking to all those folks. And we will have an meeting to try to deal with some of that. And that meeting will be held in Southwest Kansas, where we will go visit the uranium removal site in the southwest corner of the state. And we'll try to get the water straightened out and prepare for the future, which is a critical issue, a nonpartisan issue. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we can do round two. And in round two, we start with Representative Carlson. Carlin. And we go then Dodson, Highland, and then Senator Hawk. Okay, so the second round is to tell us what you thought the biggest challenge in the 2021 session was and the biggest opportunities for the 2022 session. So Representative Carlin.
Oh, the biggest challenge, and I apologize, I was having too much trouble to get all this reviewed tonight. I think the biggest challenge really centered around the COVID-19 epidemic. I mean, it just was permeated everything we did. Representative Highland talked about how we didn't get to know each other, we didn't get to meet each other. And you know, I was thinking when Representative Dodson was talking about reading everything, a lot of times we just, because we're at receptions and we talk to each other, we know from visiting, we know where that bill came from, what the reason behind it was, and we can look into specific questions on a bill instead of trying to pour through every word of every bill. That's a skill that you develop by working in the networking in the building. So I definitely think that was the biggest challenge this year because it just affected everything. The halls were empty, the people weren't there. Communicating at home was more difficult. Legislation is always a game of who can get there first and who can get the speaker to help them out the most. What was the question for next year? Would you repeat, please?
Yes, and what are the big opportunities for 2022?
Well, I don't know if it's an opportunity or not, but I had a bill that didn't get passed this year. So I will say that is a big important thing to me. We have been asked to, by the federal government, to do a commission to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, which is in 2026. And it was thought by the person who puts the bill forward that we didn't need to do that now. But the commission needed to be started now because we have to raise money in every county and do planning for every county to have an event. This is a federal requirement. So I disagreed with that and I begged, and I even, Representative Ron Estes, his wife is now a state representative, and I share a committee with her, and we worked together bipartisan on that, and I thought sure we were going to get it, but they just could not find time to put that on the floor. So I look forward to getting that done and for us to start to think positive things and celebrate the wonderful 250 years we have behind us and all the changes and growth we've had in our country. So that's a positive for next year, I hope.
Thank you. So Representative Dodson.
Okay, well, challenges for me were much the same. I think mine were multiplied simply because I didn't know a lot of the people already. And so the opportunity to meet them, to build coalitions, build the teams, you know, in the military, it's always important to have a solid team so that kind of keep track of what's going on and you can move things forward. So I really did miss that. We've mentioned the number of bills. I think that was a challenge. I agree that we may have moved through many of them too quickly simply because we saw this giant number that was coming towards us. And I know the leadership tried to move those above the line so they could be voted as quickly as we could, but we may have gone a little bit too far. The other challenge I saw was the gut and go that everybody's familiar with. Just to give you an example, when the education bill came up, this came up for the first time, I think, with some 3 policy items in it, as well as the budget of $4.2 billion. The 20 mill rate that normally accompanies that was sent in another spot to be coupled with 5 Senate bills into 1 Senate bill. The House bill on education then became a Senate bill. when it finally came out, one of the objectionable pieces of policy came out and we finally voted it. But it was difficult, I think, for any of the members to track that, much less a private citizen. So I don't think that's necessarily a good idea for democracy. Nobody, going back to check what happened is really difficult. So I didn't like that too much. The rules, I tried to pay attention at the beginning of the session to what the rules were, and I'll certainly pay more attention next time. But I think we were a little loose on the rules, and that allowed some things to be done that I don't necessarily agree with. But we'll see how that kind of starts out in our next session. On opportunities, I'd like to see a lot more done on EcoDevo. We protected cities of Manhattan and similar size on star bonds and things like that, and also had some economic opportunities for specific industries that I think will also benefit Manhattan. I agree with Representative Highland that the budget was probably rushed. We got a spreadsheet that probably had about 15 pages, and it was 12 by 17. And trying to track all of those piece parts through all of the conference committee sessions to completion was difficult. Obviously, when you do a bill like that, you're going to have to take some good with bad, because that's, Senate and House conferees trying to work that out. So I have some sympathy, but I still didn't think it worked out as best as it could. One of the other things, I think we have some opportunities to do a better job on the application of federal funds. As you know, we had 1.5 billion come to the state of Kansas, of which we got 1.2 that went to places other than Sedgwick and Johnson. We have similar amounts coming now, and those have a little bit different distribution pattern. In other words, some are directed, some are more general. Some have a longer spend rate. In other words, you can spend them over years rather than have them done by the end of December. So there's some opportunities there. Some of us also agree, and I agree with Representative Highland on this, that we need to create some kind of a reserve fund. There's no requirement to spend all that money or to send it back in taxes, because we can all see what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. And to the extent we can flatten all this out, use some of that money years from so that we don't have to do something extraordinary and take taxes back again, I think is a good thing. And I think most businesses agree that stability is a good thing for their businesses. So there is some cause for optimism for the state of Kansas. Thanks.
Representative Highland.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Biggest challenge for me, I'm a chair of a committee, the Water Committee. And the biggest challenge for me was the lack of eye contact. When I have committee meetings and people come in and testify, I like to have them in front of me. I like to watch how they react to questions. And we did not have that. They were all done by Zoom meeting. And likewise, committee members chose to stay in their offices. So it was difficult to try to run a committee, quite frankly, because you did not know who was wanting to ask questions. It was difficult to monitor the screens and find out who wanted to ask questions and so forth. On the other hand, it was great for the public. I had many comments from people all over the state that they were able to watch my committee. They learned a great deal, and they didn't have to travel to Topeka to see what's happening. They also had access to every document that we had in our committee, which is the first time where that has been available. I really liked that, but it was difficult. There's something about seeing somebody coming in and speaking, and you can tell when they're nervous. You can tell when they may not be totally upfront with you, if I can be frank about that. So that's when you delve into more questions. And with this water committee, it was interesting. Some of the members that have came before us, when you ask them where the money was, they were real hesitant and some did not answer me. So I'm spending the summer finding those answers. So it was a little difficult, but we got through it. Opportunities. There are bills that were left behind in this mad rush that we went through. We'll go back and pick up some of those that are real important. Some are really important to me, and I will be shepherding those, so to speak. I will be talking to members of both the House and the Senate, trying to get those bills through that are really important. One, for example, it's a simple bill, but an important bill. The hotels and motels were after me. They said that the fire marshal was giving them a terrible time because their hot water heaters, because of their silly regulations, were calling them boilers, which required thousands of dollars of all kinds of equipment changes, electrical changes, and gas changes to comply. So simply changing the size of the water heater to call it a water heater would change all that. I got it to the Senate, but then it did not go forward. A big opportunity and probably a lot of headaches and a lot of argument will be redistricting, and that'll all happen next year. That is a big deal. And for me, one of the really important things is broadband expansion. WTC here in Wamego, I've written letters. They were able to expand into McFarland and also down into Alma. And then most recently in Tom Hawks and I's area, the Zinedale area. And I've talked to several people over in the west side of Manhattan that have no broadband service. So I think those are things that we need to work on very carefully and make sure that the EcoDevo, a lot of that money goes to broadband expansion in our state. That is critical for our growth and the future of our state. And I'll wait for the next question. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Senator Hawk, you get to go last.
There were a lot of challenges, and we may all perceive those challenges slightly differently. I think one of my frustrations was the politics of the majority party. Ron expects me to say this, and Mike will get used to it. But there was kind of a battle of the majority leadership, both in the House and the Senate, with the governor about who's in charge of all this federal money. And when we have had other disasters, it's always the executive branch, and no problem when we had a Republican governor letting the emergency management people and the adjutant general and the governor decide how to do that. And if they needed more money, then it became a legislative problem to add to that. But there was a lot of wrestling. I won't say fighting, but wrestling over that. And so I think we have a really tough governor. And we had some bills like Senate Bill 273 that was going to create a secret tribunal to distribute money to businesses that felt like they were harmed. And the governor vetoed that. I don't think the other team was too happy about that, but that veto was sustained. And we've created a new Spark committee, strengthening people and revitalizing Kansas. I was on that group last year during the pandemic. I thought we did a really good job of taking the federal dollars, establishing priorities, and getting that out and trying to make sure that we did things that, like Ron said, with broadband, that positioned us for the future. My other big challenge, I'm a little tight on money, especially other people's, but I wanted to make sure we had a sustainable budget. Right off the bat, the other team comes up with this $300 million tax cut, mainly for large businesses. And I'm going, that's too soon, too early. Personally, I like that it's decoupled. I can now give a little more money to my charities and be able to claim that deduction and maybe get the deduction off my high mortgage rate and my high property taxes. So personally, I'm not so unhappy that that passed, but in terms of the timing of it, the fact that there were a lot of people that wanted to give away money that we didn't have yet. And we didn't have the consensus revenue estimate till we really came back for the veto session. We made some comments tonight about being upset with commerce. I think we meant labor. I'm very happy with the Commerce Department and David Tolan, he's still Commerce Secretary and now he's Lieutenant Governor. His plate's really full. I think they've done an incredible job. They brought in $2.5 billion of businesses. We had another business that they landed. My Senate Budget Committee was a little stingy and replenishing their fund that allows them to recruit businesses. We lost under Brownback a lot of the tools in the toolbox and some of those lapsed. We got some of those back. So I think Kansas is moving in the right direction on commerce. Utilities, we're going to have at least likely support for electric car charging stations. Who would have thought that would be controversial? Because the automakers saying they're going to go to electric cars within the next 5 to 10 years, where most of the cars produced are going to be electric. So I don't want people driving through Oklahoma and Nebraska or going north through Colorado and Missouri because we don't have charging stations on our crossroads. So we still need to put some money in that. I hope we can use some of these federal funds to have some appropriate charging stations. KDOT, governor swore to close the bank at KDOT. I think next year we're closing the bank, and we have a great Eisenhower plan to get that infrastructure. It creates jobs, gets our farmers products to market. And we look at it as a lot more than just roads and bridges. They've included broadband in their thinking on that, pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic, airports. There's a whole host of things that are critical for us as a sparsely populated state to maintain. Credit to the legislature and my budget committee. We put that $5 million in there, Ron and Mike, before you got there this summer with Spark money. So we could have the technology so we don't have to make eye contact. So anyway, some good things. Kansas Civility, docking building needs to be redone. We need a new KDHE lab. We need to fund the water plan, which we've not done. We have a housing study. We have a housing crisis. We need to pass Medicaid, and we need a fair redistricting plan. I'm looking forward to next year to get that done. And I suspect we'll have a few more wrestling matches between teams and the governor.
All right, thank you all. Now it's time for the questions that Linda Utoff will read to the folks here. And the first question, the order of answering is Carlson, but she's not here yet. So Dodson, Highland, Hawk, Carlin. All right. And it's 2 minutes.
2 minutes each. Thank you, Barbara. The first question we have is the League of Women Voters' purpose includes advocating for eligible voters to be registered, know the issues, and cast their vote. So how can we help strengthen confidence in democracy and enhance voting access for all citizens in Kansas? And I believe Representative Dodson is first.
Well, I was on the elections committee, and I saw what I consider a lot of very bad bills attempt to be made. One of the arguments was that people had lost confidence in our system of elections. Most of the problem in my mind has to do with people's understanding of what the rules for elections are. We not only criticized ourselves here in Kansas, but some in fact criticized 5 major states. And I would wager that almost none of those people who are criticizing knew anything about the rules in those states. All states have their own approaches to the elections. So I think the fundamental issue that we have going forward is to restore confidence through having people understand what our elections are about, our system's about. And ordinarily, I wouldn't interfere in the business of the Board of Education. But I also think that we have perhaps lost a step since I went to school. I graduated in 1964 from high school. And our ability to understand how government worked, I thought was pretty darn good. And I'm not so sure that that happens today. So I supported that bill that had us do really a citizenship test modeled on what we do for the immigration system. So I think the things that you're doing, just keep doing that, particularly on voter education, having them understand how critical it is to understand our system, understand the issues so that they can be informed when they get to the ballot box.
Thank you. Representative Highland?
Thank you. And that is a critical issue. I've been hearing from many of my constituents on this very issue. I was at a meeting yesterday, and it was a women's group, and we discussed this at fairly great length. I think, as Representative Dodson just explained, educating the public is going to be critical. And the more of us that speak in different meetings about how the process works and to increase the confidence, one of the things that came out of that meeting yesterday was we are going to train spotters to go to the election office and watch the process, so that it'll do two things. It'll show them how the process works and how controlled and safe and it is currently. And it'll convince them, and then they will talk to a lot of other folks. That confidence is important. And without spotters, which we will train, then they will train others, and we maybe even should be going down into the schools and maybe even the college level and talking to these folks about the process, how it works actually once the ballot received into the county level. I looked into and talked to a lot of people. Our system in the state is a good system. You talked to the Secretary of State, he was very confident about the results, that there was no hanky-panky going on anywhere. So I really, I think training is key. And I think building the confidence is key in that we can do that by, to include training, but also to train people how to spot and to go in and actually view how the ballots are counted to ensure them that it's fair and it's equitable and it's done very carefully.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Senator Hawk?
I should repeat my opening remarks because I think the league, but a lot of other people and organizations need to understand that voting is really the first fundamental right of a democracy. And it's, I think a lot of people don't see it as what I believe is the obligation to participate. I think the leagues always believe that we want more people to be registered, more people to vote. I think it's a little bit cumbersome to register. I'd like to see something happen automatically when kids are 18. I think the league has advocated for that so that we get young people. I noticed our young people were up, I think 14%, and Kansas was one of the lower states of 18 to 24-year-olds. Now we are one of the higher states. So our young people are either ticked off at what all of our generation here have been doing in the country, and they want to have their voice, or in some ways, we talk about educating them. I think some of us in the Middle Ages are not as well educated on the voting process, and we sucker into some propaganda. I think you have to speak truth to power, call lies what they are, and if it's a big lie that discredits the system. I notice nobody is discrediting where Republicans won. And I don't mean to make this partisan. I just say it's kind of interesting where the states are that fall down on this. I think you might consider there are some challenges legally to a couple of bills we passed. And I think the league actually at the state level joined that lawsuit. So I think we need voters to have confidence. And I don't think it helps when whoever loses says before the election that it's a cheat. And they didn't say that before. So I think we legislators have a responsibility to give people confidence I used to tell my wrestlers, I expect you to be gracious winners, but I expect you to even be more gracious when you lose. And that's part of our system. And it's why we don't kill people, because of the way elections turn out. And I think we're on the precipice, if we don't take this seriously, to do that.
Thank you. And Representative Carlin.
Yes, thank you. You know, this was an issue throughout the country. It was brought about not by people, but by outside groups that have decided that there's a risk when all people vote. And I looked at the bill again this afternoon, you know, and reading through all the things that are prohibited and changed and you must do. I, as a citizen, before I was ever involved in elected office, would never have done any of these things. I mean, there's just a list of things that a good citizen just never would consider doing anyway. But they did make it a crime, a Class C misdemeanor in most cases, if not all, to do any of these things. We had a representative from Newton, a Democrat, young man, a lawyer, who about two elections ago won his race with the real strong effort that he put into getting advanced ballots out to people, collecting them and turning them in. And his numbers were very, very high in that process. And he did it, his committee did it. You know, they worked really, really hard to get all of the, boy, that seemed to have gone fast, to get their voters out. They knew who would vote for them. They made sure they got their ballots out. I think your question, though, if I can get back to it, was that what can outside organizations do? And there's a whole list of things you can do and you cannot do. And one is the real problem for that we're facing that really actually happened was there was advanced ballot application forms mailed out by outside groups. And I don't know where the league was on that, but I know the league mailed out things. But there's now a list of things you have to do. You have to identify yourself basically and make sure everybody knows it's not an official ballot. And I think that was one of the things that you all are dealing with. And thank you. I'm already out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our second question, and hopefully you can respond back to that later in terms of the leadership group. For the future session, this question is about the future session. How will you communicate with your constituents concerning and involving them in redistricting? Do you support a nonpartisan panel to oversee redistricting? And I think our order on this one is Representative Dodson. Is that correct? And then Highland, Hawk, and Carlin.
Yeah, you see, we're going Dodson twice first because
No, that's
Carlson
wrong.
didn't
Yeah.
come. So if you
Oh.
want to, we can start Highland, Hawk,
Let's do that since
Carlin.
Representative
Dodson.
Carlson, yeah.
Yes,
Oh.
Highland first, then Hawk, then Carlin, then Dodson.
Okay.
Well, the redistricting has always been a political decision process, and that's not going to change. I did visit with a former speaker who was involved with 3 different redistricting periods. And he said the number one thing you need to do is to ensure that every incumbent is protected. And when you do that, that will eliminate most all your problems. And I'm talking both parties now. So you do that. And with that, you eliminate a lot of nonsense where people are trying to draw around city blocks to block somebody from being in a district. That nonsense got us in trouble last time, and the courts ultimately drew the lines, and my district became one of their little pets to draw lines as weirdly as they could possibly do them. And in my commitment to how do I communicate? I always communicate with newsletters, and then obviously answer questions at every meeting I attend, and try to communicate to them that the process, they may not like it, but that's the way it's always been. And then you ask whether an outside nonpartisan group should be oversight. That's why we have the judges. And they will oversee that. If we cannot make up our minds and come to agreement, but I think the most important thing is to take and look at all of the existing members and the incumbents and protect them. And I think the system will work fairly smoothly. Now, will it? Who knows? Leadership sometimes gets carried away with their power and will try to monkey with it. But I think if they left it to those that are on the committee and keep the leadership out of it, I think it'll work just fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hawk?
I love to agree with Representative Highland. I love the idea as an incumbent of doing that. I think it's a little trickier with House members than it is with Senate districts. I think the House committee set up. I'm not sure if the Senate committee is set up yet. Isn't that right, Ron and Mike? And of course, it is political and it will occur, and it will occur in the normal process. Ultimately, there'll be a conference committee. And if it doesn't get decided, then I think it goes to the court. If it does get decided, a bill comes out, I think the governor could veto it. If it doesn't take care of the criteria that are in the law and do it in a fair manner, I would suspect she might veto it. And then that throws it to the courts. Plus the court looks at it and looks at population and some of those other criteria. Last time an agreement couldn't be reached that was fair. And so the courts took it over because there isn't this outside nonpartisan group, which I wished that we had a bill that would have done that, but we didn't. Then I'm going to be optimistic that we're going to play nice and it's going to happen. In case it doesn't, I hope the courts are extremely fair and do it. And for you all to know, a bill was passed last year that changes our district in terms of how we might draw lines. May help you, Ron, but not have such a crazy district. But we have 10,000 roughly more voters that are going to be counted in Riley County because of Fort Riley and K-State that weren't counted. And the Secretary of State, Scott Schwab, asked for that bill. So I think that's going to make my Senate district geographically more compact and do the same thing to these 3 House districts, or at least to the Riley County part of it. And how that will affect Representative Highland and Carlson, I'm not sure. So it's going to be an interesting change for us having those 10,000 extra voters in our census count.
Thank you. Representative Carlin?
Thank you. You know, I really can't add much to what's been said, but I've been through it one time. Well, the year that I began to explore running in 2000 or 1998, and we were going into it, 2002, I was elected. And that year, I happened to know from communication with people in the office down there that Tom Hawk and I were going to be thrown in the same district, and we were both running, and that was really bothering me. And I was able as a citizen just to say, hey, you know, that's probably, you could move that line a little bit, and they did it. But, you know, I don't know that it made any difference for me to make a comment to them. I do like the idea. It's a little bit like the filibuster, you know, when it's working for you, you want it. When it's not working for you, you don't want it. And Kansas is not going to ever give the Democrats anything or anything, any advantage. So of course I want an advantage for our party, but I think that the legislative process that we have outlined is sufficient. it will do the job if we have, if we have people with the best interest of democracy in mind on this committee. I like the committee. I did want to serve on it. I was not asked to do so, but I think we have a good committee, and I'm just gonna, how I'm gonna communicate. We never know what's coming tomorrow in Topeka, but when I find out something, I'll be able to pass it on to you, and I will do so. Newsletters, Facebook, of course, and radio and advertising that we can do, we'll let you know, because it does help, I think, to give, as I experienced, a citizen can give input that may be helpful. So that's all I can say. I'm really happy to think that we're going to get a new look at our districts. So,
okay, thank you. And Representative Dodson.
I argued on that question with myself for quite some time, and I came down much in the way the others have described, and that is, let's keep the process in place. I think with that process comes responsibility, and if they mess it up, then they ought to be held accountable. But I think going forward, that's probably the best way to do it. I think we all talked to the same person, because, my guidance also was, don't turn any incumbents out as a result, and don't make funny shapes. When you look at gerrymandering around the country, there's some really oddball shapes, and you just have to wonder what the intent was for doing that. And you can only come up with one answer. On the House side, we've got a guy named Chris Croft, who's a very talented young man, and he's going to be heading up that committee. And they've developed a briefing so far that was at least an initial briefing that has a lot of the fundamentals in it. And so I think, like the others, we can put those kinds of things as they come out in our newsletters and so on. But I think what might work best is to make a YouTube briefing each time we update, so that people can dial in, they can hear the narrative, and as well as kind of watch the slides, because this is complex. And so I think that's probably about the only medium that we could use reliably. I don't think a K-Man talk will do the job on that one, but we can certainly at least use it as a backup. So I'd just stop there.
All right, thank
Can
you.
I add one quick thing? I think there's going to be a roadshow, and the committees are going to make some visits around the state. So you all may want league members to know about that when that happens, advertise that, and get people engaged in that.
Okay. Representative Highland.
Yes, ma'am.
He already answered that.
He did.
I was
I'm sorry.
first.
I'm sorry, I'm out of
Yeah.
order.
So that, the
Okay.
third question will be Hawk first.
All right, yes. The third question is, because this is a current issue in many states, what do you believe the role of the legislature is in determining curriculum and teacher training, specifically in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And Senator Hawk, you're first.
I am a former teacher, counselor, curriculum director, and superintendent. And I believe the role of the State Board of Education is specified in Article 6 of the Constitution. They have self-executing powers. They're elected, as are our local school boards. And I think the legislature, if they really want to dabble, assuming the legislature could ever come to consensus on what priorities ought to be, might pass an encouraging resolution in a very general sense. But I think it's not our business. I think our business is to fund K-12, but I think the policy piece of what is taught really belongs to the State Board of Education and the local boards of education to do that. And if we really feel compelled we can go to the school board meeting and make public comment like any other citizen. So I'm kind of a stickler about keeping that boundary there. And we all have a lot of great ideas, but when I was curriculum director, the biggest problem we had on all of our committees is everybody has a slightly different idea of what the priority ought to be. And as an algebra teacher, I felt like if kids had more math, a lot of these silly problems would go away. Well, the social studies teacher did not believe that. She thought knowing our Constitution and getting along with one another. And the English teacher was sure if we had subject verb agreement, we would not have all of these fights in the cafeteria. So I just think we have to stay in our lane, and we haven't done that very well as a legislature. And I have a lot more confidence in the school board, and the law says that's the way it should be.
Representative Carlin?
How can I say it any better than that? You know, I definitely think that our recent legislative activity has been trying to micromanage education. And it's been very upsetting to me because we've had court cases on the funding, and we are finally at the place now where the court is in agreement with what our plans are and what we're doing. And yet every year this education committee comes in with needling the Board of Education on what they're not doing right. And man, I raised 4 kids, and you know, they had great teachers like Linda Utoff and people that cared about them. And that's what I want for our kids. And I think that I'm not an expert there. Tom has really expertise in this. I'm no expert in this. I just can tell if my kids are progressing, if they're not. And I don't want interference in the Board of Education. So that's my position on it. And I vote against almost every time a bill that does that in any way. So that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Dodson?
Yeah, my views on this are a little bit different. You know, I think the legislature, just like all of us as citizens, has a responsibility to oversee some things. So just blind funding, I don't think is the best way to do that. So I believe in some broad general guidance. One of those things that I worry about is standards and whether or not they're measurable and whether or not we're meeting them. Again, when I was in high school, graduated in 1964, I looked at some of the things we had done. I mean, if I remember right, that was the highest scoring class to come out of our institutions, 1964. So you have to wonder whether we shaped education in the appropriate way or whether our standards have changed. But I do think we've got to measure what we're doing so we know if we're spending our money in the right spot. I think if you look at what we've done just that's been suggested for next year, we're now offering computers in 2022 as a substitute for either a science or a math course. You know, we're about 10 years late doing something like that. So again, the Board of Education is a wonderful thing, but I think we've got to prod people a little bit. I also worry again about my own education. When I look back at what I was taught in history and then what I learned in the military and just kind of living life, a lot of that history was summarized, a lot of it was glamorized for particular purposes. And it's not that that was bad, but the wholesome understanding of our history is essential to being good citizens and making the right decisions. So I think we have to play a little bit stronger role in this. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Highland?
Well, I'm going to start off by partially agreeing with Senator Tom Hawk, and I hate to do that. But we have a Constitution, Article 6, as he's mentioned. One thing he's glossed over was The curriculum is in the Constitution, will be decided by the local school boards. Right now, it's decided by the state school boards to a great extent. They lead on that quite a bit. The Constitution is there. And when I get, this is a big part of every meeting I attend, I'm attacked on this issue. And I say, look, get off your duff and get involved in the local school board. If you don't like what the state school board is doing, get involved, run for office, or find somebody that will run for that office. Nobody wants to get involved anymore. I, quite frankly, after 9 years, I'm getting tired of everybody thinking they could call us up and take care of their problems at the local level. We cannot. That's not our place. We can intervene when there's problems at those levels, but not until we're asked to be involved. I am not for that at all. I do agree with Representative Dodson that the money part, we need to have a more say. Kansas Supreme Court says we can't do that. We're going to have to deal with that in the future. We do have to have control of the purse. That's over 50% of our state budget. And somehow or other, we're going to have to work this out. But without individual participants in society being involved, it will not get solved. And I'm fairly blunt when I talk to people about this issue. They have to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara,
I might take a moment to just add that I think one of the things that's missing in our communities is an understanding of the state board's role. And because maybe because the legislature has interfered so many times in telling them what they have to do, what books they need to throw out, and what, we're getting some of that. And I think it confuses the people. We need to really have strong State Board of Education candidates if we're going to continue that system, or else change it. And I think when voters go to the polls, that's not one race they've watched very closely. We don't financially support the candidates to the point where they can give a strong campaign about themselves, and it kind of gets glossed over. It's kind of like the judges on the ballot. If you don't know anything about them, you mark yes, or maybe just leave it blank. But we've got to do better as citizens, and that's one of the league's prides is to help with citizen involvement. And I think it's an area we could do better in. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
so I
you.
have a question for the team. Is there another question to ask? Because we have time. Okay,
Yeah.
Linda, ask the next question.
So we do have time. Okay, great. And correct me if I'm wrong, but who would go first? Senator Hawk this time, right? And then it would go Hawk, Carlin, and Dodson and Highland. Is that correct? All right. So this question is, the pandemic tested the structures of our society. Of all the difficulties Kansans faced, which areas do you feel the Kansas government addressed most effectively? Where do we need to improve to prepare for future ones? I assume one's pandemic. Yeah. And Senator Hawk, you can go first.
Was the question, what did government do or what did society do?
It said, of all the difficulties Kansans faced, which areas did you feel the Kansas government addressed most effectively? And where do we need to improve to prepare for future crises?
Well, I'm not sure that we know if we were effective or not, because the situation kept changing. And I think people in general started out being scared, at least some people were, and rightly so. And I think the national level was really messed up in a lot of ways in terms of coordinating national leadership. I happen to think the governor and the adjutant general and the Secretary of Health and Environment did a really good job. Again, they had the daily briefings for quite a while, trying to share information with people. I think the shutting, and me personally, I think making the tough decision when we didn't know and we didn't want our hospitals to get overrun in terms of the ICUs and emergency rooms, shutting it down. Now, in hindsight, that may seem a little too harsh in doing that, but I don't think we knew. I think we did a great job at reactivity to the mass, but I think there was an involvement of a lot of different groups that the governor made and legislators too, about encouraging people to wear masks and social distance. And then I think all of us had the same goal of how do we get the economy back. I'm not sure we picked the essential businesses to shut down, but again, we'd never done that before. And so I think that caused a lot of heartburn. Certainly the lady that cuts my hair is still mad about that. But she managed to get unemployment through PUA. Our unemployment system blew up because the computer couldn't handle it. And I'm not sure we had enough people, but we were not set up for the number of people, as Representative Carlin said. So I think all in all, we did a good job. I think the legislature did a really good job. We met regularly trying to get the spark money out and get it into people's hands. I think we got a lot of $1.9 billion in unemployment, $7 billion of federal dollars into businesses. And I think we're coming out of it now, and we did the vaccination well. I wish more people would get vaccinated because I think that's why we're nearly getting back to normal now. So tough question. Good
It
question.
is. It is. It's a complex question. And Representative Carlin.
Yes. No, I think, yes, the briefings that the governor did with the public, I thought she was absolutely right on with that. She shared her concerns. She shared the fact that we were trying to do something. We weren't aware of, all of the outcomes. And she was very open about the fact that we had to try these things. I thought shutting down the schools was critical. In fact, I had encouraged her to do that because we had just come off of spring break, and we had in the Capitol, we had 1,000 kids come through the building like the day before we all decided we have to do something, like before it all broke. These kids were coming back, they were on spring break, and they were coming to the Capitol. They were just swarming, and nobody knew yet what was going on. And for me, shutting down the schools was essential because we did not know whether these kids were going to be susceptible to this or not, but we did know that it would wreak havoc on our school system if teachers and administrators and everybody got sick and couldn't perform. I think that shutting down businesses was essential. I hated to see it. It was horrible, but I also remember the Spanish flu, or the 1918 flu, and how they did things. And I also watched China and how were they doing things and who was getting control of their disease the best. And I really think that what we had to do is what we did. I think we could have relaxed some of our businesses as soon as we kind of got a handle on it, but we had to keep our hospitals from being overcome. One of the things that we've talked about the money with the CARES Act, we had $7.6 billion go out to businesses in Kansas, and we had $3.2 billion go out to the people for unemployment and medical and all of the needs that the people had, rental assistance, whatever. So I think that we did really try to take care of our economy, and I think we did it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Dodson.
Yes, I think a lot of things have been mentioned so far that I probably agree with. Probably the most success came from the experience of our hospital workers. I mean, hats off to them for all that they did. Hats off to all of those essential workers who didn't get a heck of a lot of support, but did it anyway. I think the governor did a good job, even in the face of lack of federal support. I think that was our biggest shortcoming, is lack of federal guidance. There was also a lack of understanding of the ramifications of the 1918 flu. It was slightly different in that it attacked a different age group. This age group that we lost mostly was the people in excess of age 65. So it was kind of a different condition. But every time each governor tried to do something that one would consider maybe a little bit tough on the economy, they'd get criticized by the national leadership, which didn't make anybody's job any easier. Now, as far as things we need to fix, we have 105 counties. So if you live in Johnson County, Sedgwick County, Riley County, Shawnee County, and so on, your health department is in relatively good shape. That is, you've got enough people, you have probably the requisite amount of knowledge that you can deal with things like this. Kansas, broadly speaking, can do well for things we understand, like tornadoes, floods, fires. This was considerably different. So I think support to those individual counties. You go out in western Kansas with a county that has 5,000 people in it or less, where are they going to get the expertise to understand, deal with this, much less to put together a plan to spend the spark money? I mean, it's almost impossible to think of how they could do that effectively. These are people that are working every day, usually farmers, ranchers, and coming in and doing this in their spare time. So I think that's where our weakness is as a system to help throughout the state and promulgate the guidance from the governor and the LCC.
Thank you. And Representative Highland.
Well, I think from the beginning, we relied too much on the federal government for information and advice. And that was, to me, kind of a comedy of errors from the beginning. We have expertise in our state. We have great universities. We have people that know all about, teach epidemiology. And we need to learn a lesson from the veterinary side as far as dealing with situations like this. Veterinarians are designated throughout the state to be involved in these situations. You're trained and you're involved. I'm not on that team. I chose not to be involved, but all over the state, to include the small counties, and we could do the same with physicians. But we have people in our state, and what we can do better is we can have a designated group that will be in charge of another situation like this. And they would relay that information to the physicians out in the field. You can't rely on these small counties, exactly like they've said before. They need help. And that physician that's designated, is trained, is ready to go, and they receive the information. I think we also need to establish, either in law or in maybe a regulation, that we have businesses, we define ahead of time what is an essential business. It seemed a little haphazard, and we need to have that defined. And so for the future, we need to take a close look at what's been learned by another profession that deals with pandemics like this in animals, and we could learn a great deal. So we need to do that. And I think that would serve us well in the future.
Thank you all very much. Barbara?
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. So thank you, everyone, Senators Hawk and Representatives Carlin, Dodson, and Highland, for the perspectives you shared with us this evening. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to the local League of Women Voters members and our guests for attending this evening. We will post the recording on our League of Women Voters website for everyone to visit and learn more from this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye, colleagues. See you at the next forum.
Good night, all.
Bye.
I'm
Bye-bye.
glad that Sydney saw the 1918.
He obviously was the very youngest one during that early pandemic.
Guys. That was one of the first things I did, though. I went back and read about the 1918 flu.
wanted to say, I didn't know that Representative Dodson was so old. He graduated the same year I did. No wonder we have all this information about good education, Mike.
We have some history right out here at Fort Riley that's readily available.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Great
Right.
discussion.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peter, what do I do? It's over. It's over.
We can end it for you.
Can you?
Yes.
He's coming.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.